Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we are in the shop yet again, and today what we're working on is the Corvette. You guys can see the Corvette is actually off the lift, but it is on jack stand. So what we're working on today is actually going to be the front cooling. You guys will remember that we did that C7 bumper install probably about a year ago, something like that. And yeah, so long story short, with that bumper, I've always wanted to make it functional. And how we're gonna make that functional is by using some OEM parts from a C7 ZR1. And as you guys can see in my hand, I have a C7 ZR1 Cooler. These are the ones that basically go up front in the bumper. I got two of these, and I don't think they were super expensive. I think they might have been like $150 each, so it wasn't too bad. And the reason I decided to go with the OEM cooler was because the fact that I had all of that ducting. We've got some of it here, there's a piece there, there's a piece over there. And you guys might remember from that video, I have a link up above, that we bought all the ZR1 stuff. So I kind of got rid of the NASCAR coolers. I actually still have them somewhere. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and use the OEM coolers. And how we're gonna end up using these coolers is utilizing these 5/8 inch billet adapters from ProTouringStore.com. I think the company's based out of South Carolina. And basically what it is, it takes the OEM LT4, LT5, and the LSA, those quick connect fittings, because that's what is basically on the end of this cooler, and it takes it and adapts it to -10 AN. So I'll be utilizing the -10 AN size. We've got an oil cooler to tie into one of these, and we've got to tie in the transmission cooler to the other side. So, and yeah, so long story short, basically this will be sitting on the driver's side cooler. You'll have the hoses come in to the side, and all that plastic ducting will go through the front of this and through the back of it. For the mock-ups, you guys can see we actually have the OEM C7 ZR1 plastic ducting front piece in here. Yes, we've got a bit of a gap on the bottom. I've got a solution for that. And from the back, you guys can see the square. That's basically where the cooler is going to sit. The cooler is going to sit square here. We've got some trimming to do, obviously, but as you can see, I've already pulled the liner, the brake duct, the bottom piece, all of this stuff. All right, guys, so this is obviously just kind of floating here. This is not the permanent install. You guys can see we've got that huge gap down there. But basically, yeah, this is gonna be what it looks like. Over here on the outside edge, you guys can see there are these two tabs that stick out. Basically, I think what we're gonna do is take a piece of metal, cut two holes in it, put some a rubber grommet around it, secure that, and go like upward. And then on the inside of it, there are two bolts. There's a flange that you can bolt to. Take those two bolts, again, put another piece of metal, and then tie that over to the subframe here for the radiator, and I think that's how we're gonna mount it. All right, guys, we've got this front fitting a lot better. You guys can see there isn't much of a gap. Actually, there's no gap on the top or bottom of where the brake duct sits. The cooler vent, that's all lined up really well. And if we go to the back, the cooler is sitting flush against that vent, so we should be good. All right, so first of all, I had to make the vent fit, and how I did that was, you guys could see I took pretty much a rectangle out of the bottom part here. Now guys, don't worry about this. We're not into the structural piece at all. This is just a kind of a blank piece that's supposed to connect the C7 bumper to the aftermarket bumper. You know, I think there's a gap, so that's why I have this here. With my bumper, I actually have the C6 stuff coming in right up and underneath it, so you'll never see it. So you can see I took a chunk out of there with a Dremel. I just measured and was able to cut that out. You guys will then see I cut out a little piece of fiberglass out of the headlight support bucket, so no bigger deal there. Again, just use the Dremel. And if you guys can see here, I did take a little bit out of the bumper. But what I needed to do, I needed to make room for the oil cooler, the hose. So I had to take that little chunk out to get this to all fit, but not a bigger deal. I am gonna clean this up and paint that. You see the nub one, the second nub on the bottom. Basically just drilled two holes through it, and I made this aluminum plate come up above the cooler. You guys can see that little vertical piece right there. I don't know, I might either weld or put a bolt through there. Just haven't really quite figured that out yet. But basically, this bolt right here will have that surface be flat, angle that down, and have the other side of it vertical, and then basically connect those 2 points. Alright guys, you can see the inside mount is fully done on the cooler. Now I haven't drilled the hole for this yet, but I think what we're going to do is, you guys can see, you saw me basically cut out this piece of angle aluminum. I drilled 2 holes in it. You can see my mock-up lines. There's a hole here, a hole here. You guys can kind of see there are clips, the J or U clips, whatever you want to call that. I did have to cut around the upper oil cooler hose situation, but that's no bigger deal. So that's all tight. You know, it's not touching the plastic pipe down here. That's all good. And I actually did have to cut a chunk out of the angle aluminum right here. That is because this was actually hitting the inner part of the fender, so, or actually the headlight bucket. Guys, that actually doesn't look too bad considering we're doing it with MIG welder. Now I am gonna go ahead and tack basically what we did on the other side, just go ahead and tack on the inside here. And yeah, that should be it for welding this bracket. Alright guys, you can see the bracket that I just ended up welding together. Well, it's been a couple hours. I had to let it cool down, but you know, there's the weld. I just bent the bracket upward at like a 45-degree angle, and yeah, then I flattened the top part out. Now I did have to slot the top of the bracket. You guys can't see it, but I did cut a slot where I initially had drilled a hole because it was just off just a little bit. But yeah, this thing ain't gonna go anywhere. It's solid mounted. I do need to work on the bolt on the upper part in the bucket, but basically I'm gonna put a little aluminum spacer in there, make sure that stuff all tightens up. But yeah, this cooler should be good to go, you know, and everything looks pretty good from the front. So you guys can see I kind of have the rear ducting mocked up. Now obviously in the C7 ZR1 there would be a second cooler box sitting where this is, but kind of like alluded to earlier, I don't think we would have the room for it. You guys look at the shape of this duct and you look at the shape of the C6 splash guard, they're totally different shape. Like, you know, you see the top there's a huge gap on the top. If you guys look on the bottom, I mean, it's flexible, but then again, you're putting the mounting tabs in the wrong areas. So, you know, the shape just is not right. Alright guys, this is with the suspension at full droop. You guys can see I did get the brake duct fitted into the OEM spot. Now obviously there's some holes here, so we might have to fill that in with some like auxiliary panels. But the other thing you gotta remember is we still have to cut a hole in this for the oil cooler. So, you know, that's another thing to consider. So, I mean, for just putting it in, it actually fits pretty decent. Now, like I was saying, the suspension is at full droop, and we are hitting the sway bar at this very end point. So if I cut like an inch off of this, I think we should be clear. Maybe not even a full inch, like just cut like ½ inch off the end of this. All right guys, just for giggles, I decided to put the C7 ZR1 splash guard in here. Yeah, we're nowhere near. You guys can see that the C7 ZR1 inner liner is like 3 inches wider than a C6. The opening for the vents for the splash guard is nowhere near where the oil cooler actually is. And if you guys can see, this little shape right here, that's off by like almost 3 inches. That vent, that brake vent, is actually, it ends on the inside of this splash guard. So yeah, this thing is nowhere near fitting. All right guys, it's been a couple days, but we are finishing up the driver's side oil cooler. And as you guys can see, we've shown this in a previous video, but this is the improved racing oil cooler. This was actually on a C5, so I need to take this temperature sensor off and pull that out because on a C6 it's in a different spot. But you guys can see the cooler. We got some fire sleeve. We got that from, that's from Raceworks. And the other thing that we picked up was a bunch of goodies from Improved Racing. So when I ordered parts for the motor for the Corvette, I actually put an order in for this heat sleeve material and some more AN fittings. And as you guys can see, we pretty much have everything that we're gonna need. There's a new gasket in here. There's AN fittings for, actually that's gonna be the transmission cooler. All right guys, so we got our new dash 10 fittings on here. These old fittings were actually dash 10, but I'd already bought new ones, so let's just go ahead and use them. We got our 1/8 inch NPT plug here, and we've got a new gasket here and some bolts over there. And yeah, that should be it. So we are gonna be good with everything for this oil cooler adapter. All right guys, if you can see, I did get the Improved Racing oil adapter on. Now we did lose a little bit of oil, but honestly guys, not that much. I don't even think that's, I don't know, a quarter of a quart. It's almost not much to even worry about. But yeah, that adapter's in there, so we're good to go. Now we gotta finish the front cooler and measure for oil lines. I just measured for the oil cooler lines, and as you guys know, we've been using Brown & Miller Racing out of Concord, North Carolina, up by Charlotte Motor Speedway. And those guys have a really awesome lightweight PTFE hose, so we're gonna use that to be dash 10. And I just used the old, used a real thick electrical wire method. And you guys can see I've got a mark there, and I probably got a few more marks on here. There's another one. And yeah, so I just stuck this thick electrical wire in the AN fitting, and I kind of just measured the end of it. And for the cooler lines, the top port on the oil cooler, that ended up being 53 inches. That's going to connect to the top port on the oil filler adapter on the block, and then the bottom port ended up being 46 inches, and that's going to connect to the front lower fitting on that oil adapter fitting as well. It's been a couple days, but if you can see, the passenger side wheel is off. It's down right here. Fender liner's all off, and I have actually completed the mock-up for the transmission cooler mount on the passenger side. So we're good to go. What we need to figure out today is everything from the cooler back. So what that entails is the rear cooler mount. So this is the one from the factory. And kind of like we showed earlier in the video, this isn't gonna line up with our current splash guards that are from the C6. And we'll be able to create a channel duct. And you guys have seen this before. We actually use the same material. It's actually the leftovers from the ducting that we created for the radiator earlier. I'm gonna make my own flange to mount against the inside. As I showed earlier in the video, the C7 ZR1 parts aren't gonna fit. And honestly, it's not worth me cutting those things up and trying to make them to fit because they break all the time. We're gonna replace those plastic grills with this stainless steel mesh. And I think I got this mesh from Amazon for like 25 bucks. So like roughly $13 a side, not gonna be too big of a deal. And if you guys can see, this mesh will fit without any issues. So, you know, we got plenty of space to cut that. We got our hoses in from Brown & Miller Racing Services out in Concord. And yeah, so these are just dash 10 crimped PTFE fittings. And you guys can see those 90-degree fittings will go into our Improved Racing oil cooler. and those will come through the body into the cooler. We've got those Pro Touring Store adapters, those 90-degree fittings. I measured the oil cooler, and this was the approximate location. You guys can see I had to kind of cut where the brake duct was. You'll see the hardware, it's just those 7mm bolts that hold almost all these cars together. And then what I did was I just took ABS plastic, cut it the length I needed, made a flange, and heated it up with a heat gun between two pieces of wood, and just bent it 90 degrees. All right, guys, so here is our inner splash guard that's been modified. You know, I kind of showed you the ducting on the ground, but you guys can see the light coming through the oil cooler. So this is gonna have direct path of air coming through the bumper, through the cooler, and then into the splash guard here. Kind of like I said, I still need to trim a couple things, but it's fitting pretty well. Got a gap here at the top. I got a gap over here on the other side of the top, but other than that, I am pretty happy with the two sides and the bottom. But like I said, we got a couple gaps I want to fill in. You'll see an assortment of clamps, body working clamps, vice grips, and yeah, so basically what I did over here was I epoxied this corner. I accidentally did both corners, both sides of this 90-degree fitting at once. Should have just done one side. That's what I did over here. It's much easier to, you know, to handle, much easier to manage. It is kind of taking twice as long for this to dry. If this doesn't end up working out, I do have some black rivets, and what I think we'll do is, like I said, if the epoxy doesn't work, I would just put in two rivets, like top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom on these 90-degree pieces, and that should close up any gaps that we have. Here is some mesh. So as you guys can see, these are pre-cut for the C7 ZR1 bumper. You got the inserts for the front cameras, then you've got the passenger side grille, and then the driver side grille is in here. So these are gonna be a real simple install. Basically all you do is zip tie it to the back of your grille. So you guys can kind of see that. There you go, that's a little bit better shot. But yeah, so this is the passenger side grille. It's very subtle, and so when we get this back on the car, you're really not gonna see it. And yes, you can kind of see the zip ties if you're looking for them. They're very small. All right, guys, we got this passenger side grille installed. We got the center mesh mounted on the grille, and yeah, so we are pretty much done with this part. Here is the finished driver's side. You guys can see I actually have the oil cooler in on this side. I've got the grille behind it, the mesh, and you guys can actually see the brake duct there as well. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much the final picture of the front. You know, I wanted to have this grille just to help kind of hide some of the stuff. And, you know, this will offer a little bit of protection because these front coolers get chewed up. They also get chewed up on the C8. So I know there's a very similar product that they sell for the C8. So I saw that, I'm kind of like, well, that's cool. And if it's behind the stock grille, it's just held in with a couple zip ties, like I said. All right, guys, you can see we got our oil cooler off the car. I did have to remove that to tighten these down. You might be able to, but I think this thing only torques down to like 8 foot-pounds, and I didn't want to deal with that, so I just removed it. So those two metric 5 bolts pulled right out, and we got our Brown and Miller hoses and the 90-degree fittings on top, and then the straight fittings at the other end. Those will go into the oil cooler. So I have the oil cooler lines ran. You guys can see it's kind of running through the radiator cradle. It's running up underneath the brake duct and then up into the oil cooler, you know, the in and out of the oil cooler. And yeah, so this driver's side front cooler is done. I got the grill, all that stuff back in. We got the brake duct, everything sorted there. Obviously we need to continue working on this rear duct, but everything from the front cooler is final installed for the last time. Alright guys, you can see the back of the grill. That's been fully installed. This is that stainless steel mesh that we showed you earlier. We finished all of the ducting material, so you know, we basically made a box attached. You guys can see all of the 7mm screws on the back here. And the one thing I did was I actually did kind of create a trim ring for this piece right here, because the C6 splash guard ends here and it ducks around, and then it's a half moon shaped, and then it goes back. So I put a little trim ring there because the stainless steel grill is now sandwiched between the ducting, the grill, and then this piece. So, you know, just creating a little bit of a sandwich effect there. But you guys can actually see the oil cooler in there. If you guys see, you can see the ducting, the plastic work. And what I did was, to prevent any rubbing or anything on the back of the oil cooler, what I did was I took a 3/8 hose, I split it with a razor blade, cut a notch in it. Yeah, you guys can see the hose right there. That's that 3/8 hose that I split. So yeah, we are 100% done with the grill, cooler, and everything on the driver's side. The next part of our project, we're basically going to be making a duct for the passenger side. You guys can see that's in progress right here. I'm almost done with that. Same procedures as the other side. I just cut out 4 pieces, bent a 1/2-inch flange, bolted that to the splash guard, and then I'm putting in the L bracket pieces, basically connecting the 2 halves and making sure that we've got a square. So that'll be going in on the passenger side. Also going in on the passenger side is going to be a new intercooler pump for the supercharger. You guys might be wondering, well, don't you have an EMP pump? Yes, I do. Well, the reason we're going to be going with a new pump is because of space, because I want to have the full ZR1 arrow on the front. So that's the front cooler grill, the front ducting for the grill, also the front brake duct. I want that brake duct to be matched to the driver's side, and that EMP pump is simply in the way. What I've decided to go with is a Pierberg pump from Germany, and you guys can see this right here. I got this pump from Dedicated Motorsports. I'll try to see if there's a part number, but yeah, it's a Pierberg pump, and it's very small. It's way smaller in comparison to the EMP pump. Those EMP pumps are really good for remote setups or tanks in the trunk. With the small tank that we have under the hood, it's way overkill. We're gonna install this Pierberg pump, and there won't be any adapters because that is really meant for 1-inch lines. I have reducers on there going from 1-inch to 3/4 because the whole coolant system is 3/4. This Pierberg pump is 3/4, so there's no adapters. I just have to basically slide this in. We might have to get some fittings and stuff and some angles and whatnot. Get this put in, and then it will be good for the supercharger intercooler pump. And as you can see here, I did get the Pierberg water pump installed as well as the horns. Guys, this install was really quick, real simple, and really easy, and really clean. We had a major change of plans. We were going to be working on the transmission cooler, and yeah, my transmission cooler line snapped. You guys can see it is in 2 pieces right here. And basically what happened was I kind of felt this piece bend a little bit. So I bent it back in the other direction, and I felt it get weaker. So I just bent it a little bit more, and it almost, as you guys can see, it almost completely cleanly snapped off. Anyway, I think this was damage from when I was trying to get this out of the car, and maybe I bent it then. I don't know, maybe it's been bent and damaged for a long time. So as you guys can see, we have a red fitting here. I was having black fittings on the other line, but unfortunately none of the suppliers have any of these compression fittings, these 3/8 to -10, and this is the only one I found. So unfortunately we will have a red AN fitting here. You know, it's gonna be buried under the car. You're really not gonna see it because it's gonna be up underneath the oil pan. So with this shorter line, that makes our lines that we had made from Brown & Miller not the right length. And so as you guys can see, I've got a whole table full of parts. We've got some -10 braided stainless steel hose. We've got a bunch of Frigola fittings. Basically all these are just -10 straight fittings, and we picked up a couple of these unions. So basically what we're gonna do is go from hard line to this -10 braided line, put the union in, and then we're gonna join it to the existing Brown & Miller hoses that are on there, because I've already got the car all fully assembled. I really don't want to have to disassemble anything to try to put, you know, more hoses, get other things made. And this might be temporary, this might be permanent. I'm just not sure, because this line and all these fittings was really expensive. So I got 5 feet of this hose. I probably only need like 2 feet of it, and I'm actually gonna need a couple, probably like 6 inches on the other line, because for some reason when I measured everything, one line was good, one line was short, and then I snapped the one line that was good. So, you know, so we're basically short on both lines. But on the driver's side, the oil cooler lines were perfectly fine. So, I don't know, something got lost in translation on here. And this is not a sponsored video, but I was been really sick of the real cheap Amazon special Chinese AN wrenches that I've owned for the longest time. I went ahead and picked up a set of Motion Raceworks wrenches. Now these were very expensive. I'm not gonna lie, these were like 180 bucks, but the cheap ones I've had on Amazon have just been stripping fittings. They've not been doing well, and I wanted a really good quality set, and not a bad way to support a good vendor. All right guys, so here's our finish line. You guys can see we've got the original hard line, we've got our compression fitting, then we've got our Frigola parts that we just picked up. So yeah, that Motion Raceworks wrench worked really, really well. Like that tightened down super clean and easy, and I didn't scratch anything up. So let's go ahead, we'll get this installed, get the other line hooked up, and we'll be done. Alright guys, as you just saw from the beauty shots, we are done with the Corvette, the brake coolers, the ducts, and all that. So, as you guys can see, the Corvette is back on the ground. There's no jack stands, there's no lift, there's nothing here. The car is ready for the dyno, and my dyno appointment is in 3 days. I am going to put the car on the lift for one quick check. I want to top off the transmission. Did leak a little bit of fluid when we took all those lines out to make that transmission cooler. I just want to make sure we're topped off and we don't have any issues on the dyno. So that is the one last thing that I want to do. Oh, and I also changed the oil. We drained all that braking oil. I probably put about 200, 250 miles on the car doing those test drives, data logging it, and sending it to PCM. So the engine oil and the transmission will be topped off and everything good to go. So yeah, I just looked. I've been working on this project for almost 4 weeks, and so I apologize that this video was super long, but we were doing a lot of custom work. It took a long time, fabrication, using plastic, using metal, even welding aluminum. So a lot of different stuff that we use, a lot of different tools in the shop as well. So, but yeah, so this is a fully functional C7 ZR1 oil cooler, transmission cooler, and brake ducts on the front of my C6. And if you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more Corvette content, especially the dyno video, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. And if you guys want to help support the channel, check out the links down below. I'll make sure to try to give you everything that we use, the grills, the ducts, the brake ducts, the oil coolers, all that stuff. We'll try to include part numbers or links for all that stuff down below. And also make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com, because anything you guys buy in there goes right back in the channel, these projects, the shop, and whatnot. So thanks, guys. Have a great one.